Hey, welcome to Spectral Echoes, a collection of Reddit stories as told by people high as a kite. But it's Reddit, who knows, right? If you like the video, don't forget to like and subscribe, so you don't miss out on these awesome horror stories. Now, let's get started.
You've lived through urban legends once thought were just stories, until they started happening to you.
Bus stop encounter. I don't know if you're like me, but I'm a big fan of urban legends, ghosts, or hauntings on Reddit. There were times when I listened to them so often that whether I was eating, studying, working, or sleeping, I would always turn on these videos to listen to. Among them, the legend of the ghost bus is probably something everyone has heard at least once. It's roughly about a person riding a bus at night and realizing that all the other passengers are ghosts or dead people. When the bus reaches the final stop, they disappear, leaving that person alone in utter confusion. I've heard this story many times, countless versions with different sensational details. However, I never thought that one day I would become the main character in that story, or so I thought. A brief introduction. I am a female, a university student struggling with piles of homework and a part-time night job at a coffee shop in the city center. My life is a constant cycle. Study, work, then study again. The tight schedule always leaves me in a state of exhaustion. I am a practical, young and quite rational person. I believe in what I can see, touch, and what science can explain. Ghost stories, supernatural, to me, are just entertainment. Nothing more, nothing less. My work shift usually ends at midnight, forcing me to depend on the last bus to get home. This schedule repeats every week. The bus at that time was usually quite empty, with only a few passengers dozing or staring out the window with a blank look. I usually use this time to put on my headphones, lose myself in my favorite tunes or interesting horror stories, as I said, to kill time. I often dozed off, trying to catch some sleep before going home. Everything changed that night. A particularly unpleasant night, cold and pouring rain, all the worst things one could think of combined. The wind howled outside the cafe window, and I just wanted to get home quickly, to crawl into a warm blanket. When I got on the bus, a strange feeling suddenly invaded. The bus was much emptier than usual, with only me and an old man sitting in the last row. I reassured myself, after all, no one liked to go out on a rainy night like this, unless forced to. But there was still something very strange. The bus I was so familiar with was suddenly much older than I remembered. The paint was faded and peeling in large patches, revealing a layer of rust. Long, deep scratches ran along the floor, something I was sure hadn't been there the night before. The glass windows were yellowed and opaque. One window might be cracked or broken, patched up with tape or clear plastic, adding to the shabby appearance. Because it was raining heavily outside, water dripped inside, leaving streaks on the walls of the bus. I frowned unconsciously, immediately sensing the characteristic musty smell, mixed with the smell of old metal, dust, and a bit of the indescribable smell of time. The seats, upholstered in dark blue or brown, were worn and sunken, revealing the layers of foam inside. The springs had come loose, and would poke at the person sitting on them if they weren't careful. The metal armrests were cold, with paint peeling in many places. I was even more confused, hesitating for a long time. Something like unconsciousness wanted to stop me from getting on that bus. But in the end, I still got on, because this was the last and only bus I could take right now. As for a taxi, dream on, my wallet wouldn't allow it. The ceiling lights were yellowed. Some bulbs might have burned out or were flickering continuously, creating a weak light. I squinted, trying to look at the driver, but he was sitting behind the cabin. All I could see was the old dashboard and steering wheel. The control knobs and clocks were all faded, hard to read. The rearview mirror was often covered with dust, reflecting blurry images. My eyes wandered, then I bumped into the only old man in the car besides me. He was dressed quite simply, wearing an old, worn-out baseball cap that covered most of his face. He sat strangely motionless, his back straight, his hands on his knees. I only caught a glimpse of him through the car's rearview mirror, but I quickly dismissed all thoughts. He must have been someone who came home late from work and was so tired that he fell asleep. I chose a seat in the middle of the car, quite a distance from him, put on my headphones, and tried to immerse myself in my own world. I tried to relax, closing my eyes, but an uncomfortable feeling suddenly crept in, as if someone was staring at me. I opened my eyes, glanced up at the rearview mirror. The old man was still sitting in the same position, but now he was staring at me through the mirror. His gaze was neither curious nor angry, nor was it the gaze of a sober person looking at a fixed point. They were completely blank, lifeless, like the eyes of a forgotten doll. I felt a chill run down my spine, an inexplicable shiver. I quickly turned away, trying to calm myself. He must be staring, I told myself. He must be looking through me, not at me. I pretended to focus on the phone screen, trying to skim through the news, but my mind was completely blank. The feeling of being watched was too clear, too intense. It made me so uncomfortable that I couldn't breathe properly. I glanced up at the mirror again. The old man was still there, still staring at me. And then, a sight that made my blood freeze. He seemed a little closer. I rubbed my eyes, not believing what I was seeing. I told myself that I must have been too tired to see clearly. He was still sitting in the last row, not moving at all. But his image in the mirror was magnified, as if the distance between him and me had been shortened in an absurd way. I looked down at his feet in the mirror and saw that his old shoes were still placed on the floor of the car. There was no sign that he had moved. "No way," I muttered. "You're too tired. You really need to rest." I tried to calm myself down. Maybe it was the mirror that was distorted, or my perspective. I was a student. I knew physics, optics. This couldn't be happening. But my reason began to waver. A feeling of unease grew inside me. I didn't dare look at the mirror anymore. I tried to focus on the phone, on the song playing in my headphones, but it all became meaningless. I felt a chill run down my spine, even though the heater was still running. My whole body felt frozen. I glanced up at the mirror a third time, quickly. The old man was closer. It was as if he were sitting in the row behind me, just an arm's length away. Those empty, lifeless eyes were staring straight into mine, through the mirror. I could feel his cold breath on the back of my neck, even though there was nothing there. My heart was pounding like it was going to jump out of my chest. I clutched the strap of my bag, my nails digging into my palms. I wanted to scream, to call for help, but my throat was tight. There was no one else in the car. The driver was focused on driving, not paying any attention to what was behind him. I was completely alone in this horror. Part of me was still trying to cling to reason. Am I hallucinating? Or am I just too stressed, too sleep-deprived? I pinched my arm hard to make sure I wasn't dreaming. The pain was real. I wasn't dreaming. I was awake, facing something absurd. I tried to turn my head to look directly at the old man. Maybe if I looked straight at him, everything would return to normal. But the fear was too great. I didn't dare to face what was behind me. Some invisible force held my head, not allowing me to turn around. I could only look at him through the mirror. And in the mirror, he was still there, getting closer and closer. The bus jolted and moved slowly, finally stopping at my stop. The rain was still drizzling, the dim streetlights reflecting off the puddles. I quickly stood up, then rushed out the door as if I had just escaped from a prison. As I stepped onto the sidewalk, a faint sound, like shuffling footsteps, came from behind me. My heart stopped. I turned around. The old man stood there, right behind me, under the awning of the bus station, just a few steps away. With the same empty, lifeless eyes, he stared at me. Nothing changed on his face. He didn't move in the car, but he appeared right behind me, as if he had teleported. All my reason, all my beliefs collapsed. I couldn't understand what was happening. This was completely absurd, beyond all limits of science and logic. It wasn't an illusion. It was real. And it was here, right behind me. I ran for my life. I didn't care about the pouring rain. I didn't care about the puddles that splashed under my feet. I just ran as fast as I could, through the rain, through the deserted, dark streets. I didn't dare turn around. I could feel that lifeless gaze still following me. I heard the rain, my feet pounding in the puddle, and a cold feeling at my back. I ran home, unlocked the door in a hurry, my hand shaking so much I almost dropped the key. I rushed inside, slammed the door shut. I locked every bolt, drew the curtains. I didn't want anything from the outside to see in. I stood with my back against the door, breathing heavily, my heart pounding like a drum. My whole body was shaking. I looked through the keyhole. There was no one. Outside was only darkness and the sound of rain. There was no sign of the old man, but the cold feeling was still there. I could still see those empty eyes looking at me from the darkness, through the walls, through everything. It haunted me. I tried to reassure myself, not in the direction I was looking wrong, but in the way it was over. I was still safe, right? But it wasn't. The next morning, when I went to school as usual, I saw the announcement that the bus service was suspended due to an accident caused by heavy rain. All the blood in my body had drained and my face was probably so pale that a strange woman asked me if I needed help. I could only shake my head stiffly. What could I say? That I had encountered a ghost bus, that I had encountered something that was not human, and that I might have been watched. Otherwise, how could I explain how I had gotten home? Or should I feel lucky that I was still here, safe and sound? Anyway, from that night on, I never dared to take the night bus again. I asked to change my shift to the day, or asked friends to pick me up if my shift was long, and even limited my going out at night. I could no longer look at the late night buses normally, let alone set foot on that last bus again. I didn't tell anyone the story in detail. Every time I tried to start, my voice would choke up, and I knew no one would believe me. They would think I was nervous, hallucinating, or worse, insane. They would just look at me with pity, as if I were crazy. Every time I passed a bus stop, or saw a similar old man from afar, I would shiver. I always avoided looking in the rearview mirror of the car, even when it wasn't a bus. The feeling of being watched never completely went away. It had become a part of me. That fear was etched into my mind. I would often wake up in dreams of the old man approaching me in an endless dark space, those lifeless eyes growing larger and larger in my field of vision. The dreams were so real that I would wake up in a panic, sweat dripping down my back. I lived with that obsession alone. No one knows the truth about that last night bus, about the lifeless old man, and about the strange distance that kept closing. I tried to forget, tried to deny it, but the memory was too clear, too vivid. The doll that always changes position. I don't know how to deal with this. I don't even know who to confide in. I just want to affirm that I am a practical, rational person who believes in what science can explain. Ghosts, spirits, and horror fairy tales only exist in books or on the screen. I never thought that one day I would experience something that is beyond all the reasoning I have ever believed in. You may not believe it, neither do I. I would definitely think this is nonsense if someone told me. But as a single mother, working as an office manager for a small consulting firm in the suburbs, experiencing all this by myself, I was confused, if not extremely scared. My life as a mother, and my child was turned upside down. No more endless meetings and trying to keep everything in our little house in order. I used to hate this peaceful busyness. God forgive me. And now I pay the price with constant fear, lurking in every meal, every sleep. It all started on Lily's 5th birthday. A distant relative we rarely saw sent her a doll. It was a classic porcelain doll, with clear blue eyes, curly blonde hair, and an exquisite white lace dress. I'm not an antiques person, and frankly, I found the doll a little creepy with its 2 dead eyes and stiff smile. But Lily was instantly smitten with it. She called it Bella, and treated it like her best friend, carrying it everywhere, from the living room to the bedroom. I smiled, happy that my daughter was happy, and told myself that I shouldn't be so harsh on a birthday gift. Every night, after Lily had fallen asleep, I would carefully place Bella on the small pillow next to her bed, making sure it was neat and tidy. I wanted Lily to wake up and find her best friend still in the same place. A few days later, when I cleaned Lily's room in the morning, I was a little surprised to see that Bella was no longer on the pillow but sitting neatly on her desk. Lily rarely moved her dolls. As she had said, dolls like to sit still. She must have woken up early to play and then forgot to put them back. I told myself, children. I put Bella back on the pillow, making sure she was in the right position out of habit. And I didn't think anything of it. But then, it started happening again. Every morning, Bella was in a different position in Lily's room. Sometimes she was sitting in the reading chair, facing the window. Sometimes she was leaning against the wardrobe, as if looking into a mirror. Sometimes I would see her sitting on the windowsill, looking out into the garden. I began to feel puzzled. Darling, Bella doesn't like to move, does she? I asked her one morning, when I saw her sitting on the bookshelf again. You need to respect your friend's preferences, don't you? I wanted to remind her of what she had said. More importantly, I was afraid that she would accidentally break the doll, the porcelain doll, which would be a big problem. I didn't know where to get such a delicate antique repaired, and she would be very sad. I thought a lot, probably out of habit. Lily looked at me with her big, innocent eyes. No, I don't. Bella will come and play with me, she said, her tone so innocent that I could only smile wryly. You're daydreaming again, I thought to myself. Children often imagine strange things. However, for a moment, I found this quite unusual. This bookshelf was obviously much taller than her. It must have taken a lot of effort for her to put the doll on it. But why would she put the doll on it? However, I didn't really pay attention. This situation continued a few times after that. She still answered the same thing, her voice even more certain. Bella doesn't like it. She wants to walk by herself. I was quite annoyed and thought she was making excuses. To confirm, every night I carefully placed Bella in a fixed position, taking pictures with my phone as evidence. I placed her in positions that a 5-year-old could do without permission. I thought I had the situation under control. One night, I couldn't sleep. Maybe it was the strong afternoon coffee, or maybe it was the work that was piling up. I lay awake in bed, staring at Bella, who was resting on Lily's pillow, through her half-open door. I wanted to see if Lily had really gotten up in the middle of the night to move her. The clock's hands were ticking toward 3 in the morning. I was almost asleep. Then, a very small sound reached my ears. Clank! I opened my eyes. In the dim light of Lily's small nightlight, I saw Bella slowly rolling off the pillow. She didn't fall to the floor, but rather, slowly, deliberately. Then what made my blood freeze? She seemed to stand up. Not like she had fallen over, but rather, she was pulling herself up and slowly moving toward the desk. I rubbed my eyes, not believing what I was seeing. I must have been too tired, or I was dreaming. This was a hallucination. Yes, a hallucination. When I blinked again, Bella was sitting upright on the desk, her lifeless porcelain eyes staring straight at the door, where I was standing. A chill ran down my spine. Although I tried to tell myself it was just my imagination, the feeling was too real. I quickly closed Lily's door, went back to bed, and tried to calm myself. I didn't tell Lily what I saw. I was afraid of scaring her, or haunting her with irrational thoughts. I didn't tell anyone else, because I knew that no one would believe a rational woman like me could tell such a wild story. After that night, I began to feel nervous around Bella. Every time I saw the doll, I felt like she was looking at me, even though her porcelain eyes were always lifeless, without a trace of emotion. I began to avoid her eyes, to avoid touching her if I didn't have to. One morning, I went into Lily's room to wake her up for school. I found Bella sitting on the windowsill, her back turned, looking out at the woods behind the house, a position that a 5-year-old child could not possibly have been in. Lily was fast asleep on the bed. I shivered, quickly closing the window, not wanting the doll to look out there anymore. But then, an event that I could no longer explain happened. One morning, I walked into the kitchen to prepare breakfast. Lily was still asleep. I was stunned. Bella was sitting upright at the dining table, holding a small child's knife in her hand, the plastic kind used to cut cookies or spread butter. Her porcelain eyes, as if, were staring at me. My heart was pounding like it was about to jump out of my chest. My blood froze. I felt a cold, primal fear. This wasn't Lily's idea of a joke. My daughter would never touch a knife without my supervision, and she certainly wouldn't have left Bella sitting there with a knife. I blinked. Part of me wanted to scream, and another part of me wanted to run away. When I opened my eyes, Bella was back in her place on Lily's pillow. The knife was gone. The table was empty, as if nothing had happened. I stood there, panting, my hands clutching my chest, unable to believe what I had just witnessed. I began to doubt my sanity. Was I hallucinating? Was I going crazy? I didn't know what was wrong with me, but I knew what I had to do now. Contact the relative who had sent me the doll. After the incident with the knife, Bella's pranks became more elaborate, but they were still aimed at me. Or rather, I was the only one who was shocked by the actions of a so-called doll, while Lily was still in the stage of enjoying and accepting everything her doll friend could do. Even excited, sometimes I would see Lily's other toys moved around strangely, as if they had been placed in impossible positions. or a picture on the wall was out of place. I'd ask Lily, and she'd say innocently, "Bella did it, Mom. Bella loves to play with those things." I thought she was covering for herself, but then I remembered what I'd seen. Once, I'd left my favorite necklace on my nightstand. It was a very small, delicate necklace, which I'd always kept carefully. I found it the next morning. It was in Bella's hand, neatly pinned to her porcelain finger. I'd swear I'd put it around my neck the night before. How could it have been there? Lily couldn't have pinned that tiny necklace so carefully to her finger. I began to sense that Bella was more than just moving. I sensed a hidden threat, a growing evil. It wasn't a toy. It was an entity that was playing with me, with my mind. I tried to talk to Lily about how Bella was being naughty, suggesting that maybe it was time to put the doll away for a while. But Lily cried, begging me not to let Bella go. She held her tightly, her eyes full of love and protection. I was torn between two options. Throw it away now, which would upset her terribly. Keep it, and I would be the one who went crazy. I started having strange dreams of Bella standing at the end of my bed, her porcelain eyes staring at me, or of her whispering incomprehensible things into Lily's ear as she slept. Every morning I woke up feeling more tired, more exhausted. The fear reached its peak when I tried to contact the relative who had sent us the doll. But she was very old, and we were very distant relatives, and it took almost a week after I tried to contact her to hear from her. But not from her, but from another relative. Because she had passed away almost immediately after the doll had been sent to us. My heart sank, fear took over, and I was shaking and screaming silently. I couldn't sleep, worrying about Lily. I couldn't live with this anymore. I knew, somehow, that the doll was working, and it was endangering my daughter, or at least my peace of mind. One night, when Lily was fast asleep, I crept into her room. I picked up Bella and felt an unusual coldness emanating from the doll, as if I were touching a block of ice. It was heavier than I had imagined. I held her close, trying not to look into her lifeless porcelain eyes. I couldn't take it anymore. I wrapped it tightly in a black garbage bag, tied it tightly. Then, I drove out of town, to a deserted dumpster in the middle of the night. I didn't want to throw it in my trash, didn't want it to find its way back. I threw it in the biggest, deepest dumpster I could find, and never looked back. I returned home with a strange sense of relief. A huge burden had been lifted. I believe it was over. A few days later, Lily started asking about Bella. "Where's Bella, Mom?" she asked, her eyes filled with curiosity. I lied and said Bella was broken, and I had to take her to get fixed. Lily was upset, but then she forgot about it, turning her attention to other toys. I felt at peace again. The strange noises disappeared, and no more worries haunted me. I thought I had solved the problem once and for all. A week later, I was cleaning out the old closet in the basement storage room. The storage room was a mess, full of old things I'd forgotten about. I was fiddling with a pile of dusty boxes when a familiar object caught my eye. Bella! The doll sat there, behind a pile of old boxes, her blue eyes staring straight at me. Her curly blonde hair was still perfect, her white lace dress still pristine. She had no stains on her, though the dumpster I dumped her in must have been filthy and muddy. I nearly fainted. I backed away, hitting the boxes behind me with a loud thud. How could she be here? No one could have brought her back. The storage room door was always locked, and I was the only one with the key. My whole body was shaking uncontrollably. I clutched my chest, gasping for air, trying to catch my breath. I knew it was Bella. I knew she was back. It had found its way home. Back to me. I couldn't throw Bella away again. I was too scared. The fear wasn't that she was moving or holding a knife. The fear was that I couldn't escape her. She had found me, no matter how hard I tried. I put her in a sturdy wooden box, locked it with a large padlock. Then I wrapped the box in chains and hid it deep in the shed, under a pile of old things, not daring to touch it. I didn't dare look at it again. From then on, every time Lily asked about Bella, or when she brought home a new doll, I shivered. I knew that Bella was still there, lurking in the shadows, waiting. The fear that one day the box would be opened, that the doll would appear again, move again, or worse, hold a small knife and stare at me, would haunt my life forever. I told this story to a few of my closest friends, but they just looked at me with pity, thinking I was stressed or haunted by dreams. I couldn't share this fear with anyone. I was alone in my battle with an inanimate object that seemed harmless. But I knew it wasn't harmless. It was a presence, a curse. It made me think of the haunted doll Annabelle and other doll horror stories. And it will never stop haunting me.
The uninvited guest. I am a college student. My major has nothing to do with photography, but I love it. My life revolves around cameras, rolls of film, and the smell of developing chemicals in the darkroom. I especially love analog photography. The feeling of holding an old mechanical camera in my hands, focusing by hand, and then anxiously waiting for the photos to appear in the darkroom. For me, it is not just a hobby, but a fierce passion. But then, that passion turned into a terrifying obsession. One weekend, while wandering around a small secondhand store, I found a Canon film camera. It looked quite ordinary, old, and had a few scratches, but it exuded a classic look that I could not resist. What was special was that it was surprisingly cheap, almost free. I felt like I had found a great bargain, a gem waiting to be mined. I brought the camera home, carefully examining each part. The lens was still bright, the shutter worked smoothly. I cleaned it thoroughly, loaded a new roll of film, and waited eagerly. I imagined the beautiful artistic pictures I would take with this new friend. I started using the new camera right away. I took pictures of everyday moments. My friends laughing in my favorite coffee shop, the park scene glowing with golden sunlight on an autumn afternoon, or the peaceful alleys with ancient brick walls. I shot through the first roll of film in a few days, looking forward to seeing the results. As I developed the film myself in the school darkroom, the familiar smell of developing chemicals filled the air. I carefully hung up the strips of film, then put the photo papers into the chemical solution. I waited excitedly for the pictures to appear, and then I noticed something strange. In every photo, whether it is a group photo or a still life, there is always a vague, almost transparent figure lurking in the corner. The figure looks like a tall, thin man, but it is difficult to clearly identify the face or clothing. It does not stand straight but leans slightly, as if observing from a distance, furtively. At first, I thought it was a film defect, or that I had developed the photo incorrectly. After all, I am a student, and it is normal to make mistakes. Could be old film or the camera has light leakage. I reassured myself. I asked a few friends in my photography class, "Hey, these photos seem to have film defects, right?" I showed them the photos. They just glanced at them. "Oh, film defects? Maybe it's because the camera is old or you're not used to developing it," one friend said indifferently. None of them saw the blurry figure. They just saw normal photos with some technical flaws. That puzzled me. If it was film defects, why didn't they see it? I tried to explain it scientifically. Maybe it was light reflection from some unwanted object, or some kind of noise that the naked eye can't see on a print. I'm a rational person, and I needed a reasonable explanation. I decided to experiment further. I loaded a new roll of film into that camera. This time, I tried to take simple shots without noise, and especially without strangers around. I took a picture of an empty bench in the park, a corner of my house, or even a selfie in my room. I wanted to eliminate any possibility of environmental or human error. As I developed the second roll of film in the darkroom by hand, I felt an unnamed anxiety. I focused my efforts, step by step, to make sure there were no mistakes. But when the photos came out, I felt a chill down my spine. The figure was still there, but this time it was no longer as blurry as before. It was a little clearer and seemed to be moving closer into the frame. In the photo of the empty bench in the park, the figure was no longer just a blur, but was sitting upright on the bench with its back to me, but its head was slightly tilted to one side, as if looking at me. In the photo of the corner of my house, it was leaning against the wall. In my selfie, it was no longer behind me, but standing right next to me, looking straight into the lens. A real fear began to creep in. This couldn't be a technical glitch anymore. It was all too consistent, too obvious. I stopped telling my friends about the photos because I knew they would think I was paranoid. I began to feel like I was being watched, even when I wasn't holding the camera. The empty gaze of that figure in the photo haunted me, even when I closed my eyes. I became obsessed. I spent hours researching that Canon camera. I searched for information about its serial number, its history. I hoped to find a record of its previous owner, or some story that might explain this strange phenomenon. I read everything I could find about haunted cameras, about the paranormal phenomena associated with photography. I found an old newspaper article about a photographer who had mysteriously disappeared decades ago. He had owned a similar Canon camera. The article didn't give a clear conclusion, only saying that he disappeared without a trace. There was no direct evidence that it was related to my camera, but such a coincidence made me wonder. I kept taking pictures, couldn't stop, partly because I wanted to find out the truth behind it, partly because I felt compelled by some invisible force. I needed to know what it was and what it wanted. The figure in the photo became clearer. I could see the outlines of his face, though it was still blurry. He was a thin man, with sunken eyes and a gaunt face. And the scariest thing was, he was always looking straight at me through the lens, not at the scenery around him. It was as if he knew I was taking his picture, and he was looking back at me. In a few more photos, the figure became more than just a presence. It began to act strangely, as if it was trying to communicate with me. In one photo of a deserted street, the figure was pointing toward a dark alley. In another, it was standing next to a torn sign with a single letter on it. I felt like it was trying to give me a message, a warning, or an invitation, but I couldn't make out what it was trying to say. I became completely obsessed. I lost sleep, lost weight. I knew what I saw was real, but no one believed me. I began to wonder if I was going crazy. I went to a psychiatrist, but I didn't dare tell the whole story of my horror. I just talked about the pressure of studying, the stress, and the strange dreams. The doctor prescribed sleeping pills and advised me to get more rest. I took the pills, but the dreams of those sunken eyes and that haunted face still haunted me. I loaded the last roll of film into the camera. I felt a strange urge, a feeling that I had to face it once and for all. I decided to take one last picture. I raised the camera, not to take a picture of the scenery or my friends. I closed my eyes, took a deep breath, then opened them and pressed the shutter. I took a picture straight into the mirror in my room of myself. I wanted to see how it would appear when I was the only subject in the frame. I ran to the darkroom. My hands were shaking as I dipped the photo paper into the chemical solution. I held my breath and waited, and then the image came into view. It was my selfie. I was standing there, looking straight into the lens. And right next to me, right against my shoulder, was the gaunt, sunken-eyed figure of that man. It was no longer a blur. It was clear, as if it were a real person, standing there, right in the darkroom with me. I could see every wrinkle on his gaunt face, and he was smiling. A sinister, twisted, unkind smile. The most terrifying thing was not its presence, but its face. Some of its features, especially its eyes and the corners of its mouth, bore a terrifying resemblance to my own. It was as if it were a distorted, aged, and tormented version of me. I screamed, a dry, choked scream. I dropped the photo, dropped the film, spilled the tray of chemicals. I hastily smashed the camera. I smashed it, smashed every piece of porcelain, every lens, every part. I didn't want it to exist anymore. I wanted it to disappear. After that night, the figure in the photo never appeared again. The camera was completely destroyed. I tried to throw away everything related to it, but I could never escape the haunting. Every time I looked in the mirror, I saw a glimpse of that sinister smile, as if it were somewhere in my subconscious. Every time I took a picture with another camera, I was terrified that the figure would appear again, standing right next to me, looking straight into the lens. I knew that I had not just photographed a spirit, I had unwittingly invited it into my life. And even though it was no longer visible in the picture, I knew it was still there, lurking in the shadows, waiting for a moment to come back. That fear would forever be a part of me, a reminder of what I had seen and what I had become.
If you like the video, don't forget to like and subscribe so you don't miss out on these awesome horror stories.